Hi there, garden friends, and welcome to my little cottage at Oak Hill in south of Sweden. It's late May and I am sitting, keep planning my little vegetable plot here at the hill. And it's been a while since we were here last time, and to be honest with you, I have nearly spent any time at all here last couple of weeks, months, except for some work with my mulching. It's been freaking cold in Sweden, and it is still cold nighttime. So I have been busy taking care of the more important garden at home where we live. And since this is not that important, I have tried to keep away, when it does not feel that comfortable to be out working. But since we were here last time, I have been able to put on a lot of silage on my beds. And also you see I have finished this bed climbing up through the hill. So I now have 2 beds to grow, and I simply love it. I love the view, and I love the fact that I did it, because it's kind of hard work to do this. May sounds easy, but it's a lot of digging involved, and well, it's kind of heavy, to be honest. I will show you in another video later on how I did the work, but this is how it ended up, and I'm very happy about it. So what I also did is that I put some silage on top of some of the other beds, and I have chosen those beds because I am going to grow like hungry plants here, cabbage and some artichoke and pepper, and let's check my plan, well, cucumber and also the squash, I think. So they need a lot of nutrition in the soil. Hey, hey! Hey! That was actually my neighbors at home. They provide me with lots and lots of grass clippings, but this cottage is a few kilometers away. So, well, the peppers and the cabbage, etc., they need plenty of nutrition in the soil or where they grow. So I cover the bed with a thick layer of silage. And what I also did is that I have sown parsnip way too late. They will not be able to harvest in early autumn. And I also planted out some leek. I have planted the leek, well, close to each other, so I didn't space them that much, and that is because I aim to harvest them when they are quite small. I don't aim for the heavy leek, thick as my arm. If I aim for that, I will space them better. But in this case, I grow them close together, and that will go perfect. I didn't cover this bed with any mulch at all, and that is because I usually don't do that when I made sowings into a bed. You do not want to cover a sowing with grass clippings or silage or straw or anything, because it will prevent the germination to be successful. Some seeds that germinate are very, very tiny, and they cannot press themselves up through this layer of manure or silage or grass clippings. So you simply do not want to mulch the bed until the plants are a bit taller. And you see also, maybe I should have started with this, to mention the spinach. As you can see, I have some spinach from the sowings I did in last episode. Today now I have a plan. I brought some seeds. I am going to sow a few things, pre-cultivate them. I also going to sow a few things directly into the ground. I am going to plant some cabbage and some chive, I think I brought with me too. And I had to have a discussion with myself about the tomatoes. I'm going to show you the tomatoes later on. I have 50 plants They are ready to be planted out, and I am actually going to use the third space here, even if it's not finished yet and does not look as good as the 2 other beds. But as you may see, this hill is very windy. When it's like calm and very peaceful at home where we live, this garden is always very windy. And except that, it's sunny in daytime, but in nighttime we expect like 4 degrees Celsius tonight. And if it's 4 degrees Celsius, it could be more likely like freezing, depending on if it is like 4 degrees, 5 degrees below zero freezing, it could be either both. So we are not safe yet to plant out the things that are very like vulnerable. They don't stand frost at all. So I now stand with the choice. I keep them indoors, but to keep them indoors, I simply have to transplant them into bigger pots. I did not want to do that, but I think I have to. Do you remember the plan? Let's have a look. And it is still in Swedish, so you will not understand anything, but this is where the spinach grows. So I'm going to remove that and replace with carrots. This bed is with leek and parsnips, and I brought with me some chive. I'm going to put 2 plants at the end of this bed. Here I'm going to grow the pepper, the artichokes, cucumber. None of them are ready to be planted out today. This bed with the woven edge is for the brassicas, like broccoli, the kale, some filderkraut. It's a cabbage with pointed head, and I also have a cabbage pointed head, a red one, calibos. I should do that today, I think. And in the palette colors over here, I'm only going to sow the carrots. And then none of these beds are ready to be planted either. I have to wait for for warmer weather. But here I brought with me a few things that I'm going to sow today as well. Some summer flowers, the squash, melons. I'm going to try melon. This is crimson red. It's a watermelon. This size is like amazing for a cabbage, and I must say I really succeeded with the pre-cultivation. And to be honest with you, I think the Brassicas are one of the vegetable family that I am best in growing. These are my favorites. And this is filderkraut. It's a very tall variety of pointed head cabbage. It's really something. This is like an ordinary kale, green. It's tricky to choose. I love them all. Let's go for 1 black kale and 1 broccoli. I am not sure if you have ever heard of broccoli before, but broccoli is a mix between the black kale and broccoli. So it's like 2 in 1. Some people wonder how to plant in a bed that looks like this. I mean, where it's no soil, and it's very, very easy. You simply make a hole like this. There is no soil in here. I make a hole. It should be moist in here, and then I put this silage around this plant like this. I think it's very interesting the fact that people are very convinced that you have to grow in pure soil when you grow vegetables or flowers, when you can actually grow in more or less like a heap of something that will become soil. And I hope I get some good results so that I can show you. I have soil underneath, let's say 20 centimeters below. Oh, you must have a look at this. Oh, my precious. Look at this. It's not necessary, of course, to have this size of a cabbage when you plant them out, but they will keep much better from like huge damages from slugs in this size. I cannot plant out in a garden with slugs, you know, the tiniest cabbage plants, not possible. One thing to keep in mind when you plant cabbage and kale and kinds of things is that those are big plants. They need space. Some of them, they grow more upright, like the kale, broccoli, yeah, different varieties of them. While the cabbage, different varieties of cabbage, the Savoy, the pointed head, and ordinary cabbage, they could be like 1 meter from this side to this side of the plant, so they need lots of space. And you can decrease the space by simply removing the outer leaves. But when planting, do not plant them too tight. They will grow better if they have some space. This looks beautiful, doesn't it? So happy to see this. It's very important when you do this kind of planting in silage or straw or manure or whatever, that you check so the material is moist. And if it's dry, you have to water the plants very carefully before. Just put the whole pot in a bucket of water, for example, so that it's like wet. And then you have to water carefully a couple of days afterwards. But now I managed to do this planting just before a rain. It's going to rain tonight, so that will solve itself. Well, I think let's move on to the spinach. This is really boring. I mean, plants like this, flowering, I mean, it's not even useful to bring in, so I only harvest the bigger plants, and I will let the rest of them go to the compost, I think. You may think this is a bad idea, and I mean, if this was like the only spinach I had, I might be more careful, but we have tons of spinach at home, and they are like all over the place. The leaves, the size of the leaves are the same as my head. So if I compare, when I was completely new to gardening, I could feel very disappointed at myself when I didn't reach a result that I wanted. But by now I am more used to watch also the failures and thinking of them as a normal part of the process. And also it's important to keep in mind that even though things don't turn out in the best way, most perfect way, you still learn things, right? I could have harvested this as like a baby spinach, but right now it's way too much work for me and I don't have use for it. In the outer space I have put onions, spring onions. The things I have in the bucket are pure green manure, and I use this frequently in both my gardens. So instead of going to the compost heap and just leave it there, I have sort of a compost heap in the garden. I choose one bed, let's say 2 or 3 beds if it's a large garden, where I dump things. And in this case, I dump things in this bed. So I simply put it here, and with the help of worms, it will be nice soil. And one thing I have noticed as well is that sometimes if you have slugs in the garden, they will go for this instead of the more important vegetables. Oh, was a hole in this? Hello. This will dry here and will be some extra food for worms. 2 rows of carrots. Well, there are a few things you should know about carrots. In my climate in Sweden, we have a short season. It's May now, and already in September we have the first frosts, even in south of Sweden. Some years not, but most likely. So there are not like a huge amount of time to grow things. So I tend to use 2 varieties of carrots. I use the early varieties, the fast-growing early varieties. In Sweden we call them summer carrots. And I also grow the late varieties, slow-growing varieties. In Sweden we call them fall carrots or winter carrots. And the summer carrots, they tend to mature, be ready for harvest in only 3 months from sowing. And the late varieties may take like 5 months, 4 months, or so on. The fast-growing early summer varieties, like Nantes I have here, they are super nice to eat like fresh, but they don't store that well. And in my case, it's tricky to store root vegetables as well because we don't have that space indoors. For example, so I use a clamp, and a clamp does not keep the summer varieties that good. So at home I grow mainly the late varieties and some early varieties also in different places. And I repeat the sowings, so I make like a sowing like this, and then I fill up with a next bed, let's say 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, and so on, to have the fresh harvest late in the season. So usually I make the first sowings in wintertime already, winter sowings, and then I have the spring sowings, and I also sow the early varieties in summertime. The latest I sow the summer varieties are in July, and they will be ready for harvest in October, November in my part of the country. In northern parts of Sweden, I would say maybe June will be the latest. The summer carrots are possible to harvest quite thin, when they are not that big. So I don't mind if the seeds come quite close to each other. So I simply pick up some seeds between my finger and my thumb, and I sprinkle the seeds in the row. And you notice, of course, I have already watered before I sprinkle the seeds. And I hope you wonder why, so I get to explain it. This way makes it very fast to sow the carrots. Winter carrots I sow one by one with spacing, let's say 3 centimeters between each seed, because winter carrots may be really, really big over the neck of the carrot. All right, so the water. Carrots are really boring to wait for. That's the truth. And it's not a very nice vegetable to grow along with kids, because you have to wait so long for the germination. And it may end up from sowing to maybe like 30 days. It's a month from sowing until you spot the little plant in the soil. And meanwhile, you have to keep this place moist so that the seeds will grow in a good way. And that could be really tricky to do, actually. So my way to do it is to water this row before I put the seeds in the ground. It will give them a very, very good start. And I do the same with parsnips and nearly everything that I sow directly into the ground. In a couple of hours, it's going to rain. So I don't have to think about that for now. Well, I just wanted to show you the tomatoes. They are looking great, but they are ready to transplant, to be put out in the garden. And well, they are now planted in a pot that is too small. This is a 9 centimeter pot, and it's way too small. See, the roots are definitely ready to grow in the ground. And these are the pianolo tomatoes. I told you I'm going to grow we call them in Sweden like everlasting tomatoes, like Principe Borghese and Ponderosa, Pomodoro, etc. So I have 3 or 4 varieties of the pianolo tomatoes. I also have the subarctic plenty and a variety called Ukraine purple. It's well, it's like this beef tomato, a large tomato, purple variety, I think. I chose it only, it's silly, I know, but I chose it only because it would be possible to watch from the road. People are going to pass here and say, "What is that? Is that a big tomato?" Yes, it is. But as you can see, the tomato is having some trouble, and it may be like a week or 2 weeks before I can plant them in the garden. So I really have to solve this in some way, and I think I have to transplant them into 11 centimeter pots. I did not wish to have that work too, but I might have to do it. Melons. I love melons. I have never succeeded with them in the open in my garden ever, but I harvest plenty of melons in my polytunnel at home. But this is the year, and I'm going to go all in for watermelon crimson red in this little garden. It is said to be an extra early variety. I've had great result with it at home in greenhouse, but it should be suitable also for growing outside. When it comes to the beans, I have a trick. I usually sow 2 beans in each hole or in each spot. That makes it bushier at the place where I'm growing the beans. And beans are also extra tasty for like birds when it's newly like germinated. And if I sow 2 beans at one place, might be one for the bird and one for Sara. You see, I put them now in this tray, and I'm actually going to bring them home and put them in my greenhouse, because melons and cucumber, squash, beans, they should germinate in a warm place. Otherwise it's most likely that the seeds will rotten. It's the same with corn. So I put them in this tray and I fill up some water because today I didn't have time to water the soil before I make the sowing. So I will do this afterwards, and it's easier for me to water from underneath than risk destroying the sowings, the surface of the sowing, watering on top of this. So I will bring it home, put it in my greenhouse, care for it, and hopefully in 2 weeks I will be able to plant it out when the weather is warmer. I get so many questions about growing cabbage, brassicas, the damages from caterpillars, etc. And of course I have all the kinds of problems with my vegetables that other gardeners have too. I have caterpillars, I have slugs, I have everything. But I hope you notice that I get pretty nice vegetables to harvest anyway. I never use like poison in my gardens. It's just way beyond what I think is okay. I sometimes use, it's like a liquid consisting of, very, very small bacteria that you spray on plants to kill the caterpillars, and that is okay to use in an organic garden. I prefer to use a netting. Netting, of course, leaves a few things to wish about the aesthetic way of the garden. But I think it's very practical. You put this on top after you have planted the brassicas. Sometimes I keep it all season long. Sometimes I remove it when the plants are bigger. We'll see how we'll choose to do here. It's important that the net is close to the ground so no butterflies or the moth can find its way in. I might change my mind later in season, remove this and go for the spray instead. We'll see, but in a way I think it's very good to show people also what it's like to grow vegetables. I mean, you buy a cabbage in the supermarket and you hardly give a thought on how it's like growing it. And cabbage is among the vegetables maybe the most popular among the pests. So it's really tricky to grow them. And don't for a second think that, commercial growers do not use like pest controllers in different ways. I mean, all kinds of vegetables that you buy from the supermarket are being treated in some way. So maybe cabbage, brassicas are among the most healthy things you can grow in your home garden. And now we will have to, as we say in Sweden, hold your thumb for the plants in here. It's like 11 plants right now. And a bed like this can really produce a huge amount of food, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you for watching, and I hope we'll see each other in just a few weeks' time when it's ready to plant the other beds around here. I wish that it will be good weather by then. Bye bye!